In a recent video, which I'll link to in the description, Patrick Bartley discussed the difference between being an artist and a working musician, and the training and the mindset that's required for those two different roles. He challenged other educators to weigh in on the question, so here goes. Patrick divides musicians into two categories: artists, who use their musical ability as a vehicle for creative expression, and working musicians, who use their musical ability to earn money. He says that while it is possible to be both an artist and a working musician, that's a difficult balance that will likely involve sacrifice in other areas of life, and therefore most musicians will need to focus primarily on one or the other. Further, he makes the point that when music education focuses on the artist side of the equation without giving equal attention to the pragmatic realities of making a living in the music business, well, students may leave school with unrealistic expectations and insufficient preparation. Now, I don't disagree with any of that. It's a given that a jazz musician who achieves the very high level that Patrick has at a relatively young age is rarely compensated commensurate with the talent and the hard work that has brought him to that level. For as hard as it is to learn how to play jazz well, it's an unfortunate reality that the market for that music is very small. Now, I want to emphasize that this is not a reason not to do it. If financial reward is the measure of the value of art, well, there will be precious little art. Beyond that, there can be financial rewards in the music business that don't directly flow from your artistic ability, but are impacted by it. Of course, it's been said that art is its own reward, and that is true, although my dad would have pointed out that you can't eat it. In this video, I made the point that there really is no downside to being a musician. The question is whether to be a professional musician. Now, it's commonly accepted that doing something you love for a living is a desirable goal, but there is a downside to it as well, when that thing that you love is subject to the pressures of commerce. Patrick argues that the only musicians who can fully devote themselves to the artistic side of the pursuit are those who have an alternate source of income. Now, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a self-described working musician. Looking back, the ambition was evident when I was at Berklee studying jazz, but with the goal of becoming a studio musician or session player, which is kind of the ultimate working musician. Now, given that the studio scene took a big downturn right around the time I finished school, session work turned out to be a significant but not the primary aspect of my performance career, which also included Broadway pit orchestras and casuals or club dates. All of that fits Patrick's definition. And those gigs allowed me to enjoy a reasonably comfortable lifestyle and support a family while never working a job outside of music. Along the way, there have been artistic pursuits to be sure, and you can hear examples of some of those on this channel. But I clearly chose one path over the other in terms of where to put most of my time and energy. Still, and I think this is a universal truth, my abilities as a jazz musician earned me respect from colleagues, and that translates into calls for other kinds of gigs, pretty much all of which pay more than jazz gigs. The irony is that the further you get from your artistic passion, the more money you might make. The working musician's rule of thumb is this: when your musical efforts are tied into a larger money-making venture, you get a piece of a larger pie. If you play a jazz gig, the club pays you from the profits generated by the cover charge and the food and the drink sales. When you play on a commercial for McDonald's or in the orchestra for a large-scale theater production, well, you're playing a small part in generating a much larger profit, so your share is commensurate. If I play on a 1-hour session for a jingle that runs for 10 years, that 1 hour may earn me more than all of the jazz gigs combined over that period of time, if not a lifetime. Patrick makes the point that you don't have to be the best to be a successful working musician. Now, that's true, although it depends on the situation. Playing in a wedding band requires a different level of skill than playing on a Hollywood soundtrack. But both require craftsmanship. And this is how I describe myself, as a craftsman rather than an artist. Now, I once said that to a university class, and the reaction ranged from surprise to dismay. But I wear that badge proudly. I think the definition of craftsman lies somewhere between artist and working musician, since craftsmanship is necessary for both. An artist, to my mind, is someone who seeks to create something new. A craftsman might work within established form or boundaries, and yet still create something that's aesthetically pleasing. Now, these may be simplistic definitions. Is someone who paints a realistic still life any less of an artist? Patrick also points out the distinction that the artist creates for herself, while the working musician creates for others. We're hired specifically to produce something that meets the need of the person who hires us, whether that's to sell a can of soup or tickets to a show. In some respects, a successful working musician is like a chameleon. The more stylistic bases you can cover, the more employable you become. Now, I note that Patrick instinctively backed away from the description of a band leader as an employer, but I think it goes to the heart of the matter. A working musician is employable. An artist generally is not. Now, that's not to say that an artist cannot derive income, but it's more a matter of individuals buying your creation rather than someone paying you to create it. An exception, of course, would be grants, which exist to support the creation of art as a public benefit in the absence of commercial viability. The working musician is guaranteed pay as part of the contract. The other part of the contract is the expectation that you are able to deliver what you're hired for. The rule of giving the customer what they want applies to the working musician as well. Now, as to whether music schools in general emphasize artistic development to the detriment of the development of marketable skills, I suspect that varies with the school and the perspective and the experience of individual teachers. I've found that students at the university stage are so overwhelmed with the challenge of learning how to play the music that one has to be careful about overloading them with worries about how they're going to make a living as a musician. So I don't ignore the realities, but I try not to beat them over the head with it, because that could cause someone to give up before they even get started. I think we all start out with a somewhat rosy view of what life will be like as a professional musician. There are many things that we cannot anticipate. Now, some of those things I think a teacher can communicate to a student, but others will have to be learned through experience. I do believe that the study of music, and especially jazz, equips us with the critical thinking and improvisatory skills that will help us chart a path through an unknown future, wherever that path takes us. So I deliver musical instruction with a clear conscience, but without rose-colored glasses.